ओम नमो भगवते श्री रामकृष्णाय। ओम अखंडमंडलाकारं व्याप्तं येन चराचरं तत्पदं दर्शितं येन तस्मै श्री गुरवे नमः। हरि ओम। Dear friends, in the beginning, I convey my prostration to the Lord Amitabha Buddha. I convey my prostrations to the Master Venerable Chin Kung also, and also my love and greetings to my brother monk, Swami Atmeshananda, who is in charge of the Brisbane Ramakrishna Mission Center, and all of you who have come today, taking your time to listen to a topic on harmony of faith. Is there any real solution? The question that has been put here seems to give a partial answer in the question itself. What is the question? Is there any real solution? That means it supposes there are solutions, and perhaps none of the solutions seem to be real. So, is there any real solution? If you see very closely this harmony of faith, most of the intellectual people, educated people who love peace, they always say, yes, I believe in harmony of faith. I come from a monastic order in the name of Sri Ramakrishna, who stood for the harmony of faith in India. Our master Sri Ramakrishna was born in 1836, and he went on practicing different methods of religion. For instance, there are several methods in Hinduism itself. Along with that, he practiced Christianity also, and then Islam also. And finding a truth for him was through this path of spiritual practices, which we call sadhana. Sadhana means spiritual practice. By undergoing several sadhanas, he came to the conclusion that the world may have different faiths at different places, but all of them talk about God, and that God is one. If you are religious, then you adopt certain ways of life, and those ways of life externally may be different, but the goal to be attained is same. In this way, he said to the world that the paths may be different, but all these paths lead to the same goal. Now, this is not a new idea in Hinduism. If you see the Vedic age of India 6,000 years back, you will see the same concept has been told. That's why the most tolerant religion in the present world, the historians point out about Hinduism, because the Hindu followers have never waged a war on the pretext of a religion. So they say like that. We have seen in the history that there was no war that has taken place on the pretext of religion. There may have been many wars. We know that the history, even Mahabharata war, we all know that. Huge war it was. But then that was not based on religion, not based on faith. So based on faith, there was no war. Even when the Hindu kings, even from far distant southern India, the Hindu kings came. They came to Southeast Asian countries, but not by waging war. By sending intellectuals, by sending religious preachers, without getting a drop of blood falling onto the ground, they had spread the wonderful truths of the Vedic religion. So, we find that everything that has been said in the history, we find, yes, it is true even today. The mild Hindu, as Swami Vivekananda put it once, was always willing to go for peace and harmony. What is this present situation regarding the existence of many faiths? We look around. Even 2 days before, there was an explosion in one of the European capital airport. Several people died. We find different places, different types of atrocities are going on. They are all being recorded. In the modern technological world, everything is taken, videos can be taken, and the messages fly within seconds. So we all come to understand that how gruesome activities, killings, murders, mayhem being let out in the name of religion. Do you know that the modern youngsters who are studying in universities, they don't want to believe in any religion? One young lady was sitting with me in my flight from Sydney to Brisbane today morning. She said she is a Catholic by birth. And then she added, she doesn't want to go to any church. I asked her very humbly, why is it? Does she not believe in God? Does she not believe in the divinity of Christ? She said, no, those things are set apart. But religion is not for peace. Because she has been convinced somehow to come to this conclusion that religion is not for peace. So she doesn't want to believe in a religion, even though she was born and brought up in the religious tradition. So we find the modern generation is becoming more and more to go for non-believing, or what you call non-believers. In the 5 years before, there was a census taken in USA. In that, 63% youngsters between the age of 20 to 40, they have declared that they are non-believers. Now, we as religious leaders, we want to promote our religions among the masses, among the people, telling them this is a very good way to lead a peaceful life. And they ask, where is the peace in religion? Every faith is fighting with another faith. Every faith is trying to put down another faith. Where is the respect and dignity for the other faith which you do not follow? In this context only, I have great reverence for the Master Ching Kung here. This venerable, he, though born in China, he came to Australia and he was in USA. He saw many countries. He moved around many people, and then he established this wonderful Toowoomba, PCCLA. What a beautiful concept he has. The dignity to every religion and the professors of every religion is very important. One day in Durban, I requested a person of another faith to come and speak to our congregation. First 5-10 minutes he was speaking very well, and then he started finding fault with our faith. How dare you do that, going to the another place? So this is a Buddhist monastery, nuns are living here, and Buddhist practices are being done here. Suppose I come and sit here and speak ill of Buddhism. Will that be gentlemanly? No. That is not requested. So, to give dignity to the another person of professing another faith is very, very important. This is even simple common sense of our life must show us that you must give dignity. So, what we find in the present state is a very sad, sorry affair. It seems the religions are fighting, though the religious authors, the religious organizers, or the religious faith originators, they never criticized other faith. They never went on telling that other faith is bad. What they said in the context of harmony of faith, we must understand one thing, that if you follow one faith, have 100% belief in your faith. You should not get distracted. You should not feel that what religion I am born and in what religion I am growing up, that is something, there is a lacuna in that. There is some mistakes in that. Let me follow another religion. That is not encouraged in Hinduism. So Hindu religious leaders say that, our ancient scriptures say that if you choose a particular God form and a particular God name, have that as your Ishta Devata. Ishta Devata means what? Chosen ideal. My parents may be believing in one faith. It doesn't matter. That's why in India, when you go to India, which is the birthplace of Lord Buddha, you will find there, every family you will find, the father is devoted to one God, the son is devoted to another God, the wife is devoted to another God. Each God that they have in their mind is called chosen ideal, along with the society's God. So if you are a Buddhist, then you follow Buddhism, the religion of Buddha. What is the religion of Buddha? Those who follow Buddha's religion, they know very well. Buddha has given out a path. He has given certain principles to be adopted in our life, and that is what he has stated, and that you follow. Then you profess to be a Buddhist. If you follow Christ's teachings, and if you go by the way that Christ has shown, then you are called Christian, and you adopt that method of life for your progress in spiritual life. Likewise, every religion has got admirers, followers, and these followers have to believe in what they do. Then the society is becoming smaller and smaller and smaller. The population is increasing in manifold terms, but we are becoming smaller. That's why it's called, the world has become a village, they say. The world has become a village. So how it has become a village? Village is a small place. World is huge and vast. But this world has become village in the sense we all have come together at any place. Even take for instance this Toowoomba or the Brisbane. It's a small town in Australia. But here you will find all types of religious followers, you will find. whether it is 10 people or 100 people or 1,000 people. Small, small groups have come together and living together in one society. So the world is really becoming a village. We are able to interconnect with each other and we are able to talk to each other. In this situation, should we take it for granted that religions should oppose, religion should fight? No. What are the conflicts that are coming from the faiths? If you see our world, we understand that each faith tells its followers, or not the faith actually I should say, the leaders who are supposed to be to lead the society, they tell their congregations that our religion is true religion. Other religions are not religions. So don't go by the teachings of other saints and sages. Follow our path. It is good, as I said, if you have a chosen ideal, that your mind is fixed to your ideal, it's very good. But it doesn't mean that you have to deprecate, you have to talk ill of the other religious leaders, not necessary. Because you are telling your congregation that our religion is alone true, rest of them are not true. What is this called in philosophy? In philosophy, this temperament of holding the view that mine alone is true, the rest are untrue. This is called exclusivism. That is, excluding everything from what is truth. This feeling, this idea of exclusivism is available in certain religions. Certain religious leaders, they go to the pulpit and then shout at their voice and they say, our religion alone is true. What about the other religions? What about those great people who are born in other religions? Are they all fools? They say yes. They are mistaken. They are mistaken. They should be shown the correct path. So let us take either by writings or by sword and tell them that your religion is wrong. So adopt my way of life. Your way of life is not correct. This is called exclusivism. So long this exclusivism operates in the society amongst any faith, you can't make harmony. But all people are not exclusivist. Some of the people, even among the exclusive followers, they are awakening. They are seeing the world. In this context only, I told you, the world has become a village. They come and stay in another country. And then they look at other people. They go to other worship places and they find what is the difference between ours and them. And it opens their eyes. And they say, oh, there are different types are there in religious practices. I was thinking mine alone was there in this world. So Swami Vivekananda, the founder of the Ramakrishna Mission, to which I proudly belong, he said a small story in the Parliament of Religions in America. In 1893, look how many years have gone. 1893, Swami Vivekananda came in America to talk in the Parliament of Religions. The Parliament of Religions was convened by Christian missionaries in America. The purpose of the Parliament of Religions was to show to the world, bring all the religious leaders in one place. That was a very good idea. So far nobody has done. First time in the history of the world, all the religious leaders came together in an English-speaking country. So America spearheaded that. We say, wow, very good. We appreciate that. But What was the purpose of that? The purpose was to show to all the assembled leaders that our religion alone is supreme. And there, all the religious leaders were present. There, unknown man to the world, Swami Vivekananda went from India. He was there. He stood up. He was not willing to speak. He was little afraid, nervousness. He was sitting there, and the master of ceremonies used to come. Sir, your turn to speak. Please come. He said, no. Please let another person speak. Like that, one by one over, he became the last. Still, 4,000 people were sitting there in that huge hall. And Swami Vivekananda rose. There was no mic. He started, Sisters and Brothers of America. Only 5 words, 3.5 minutes, people were clapping, clapping, clapping. What moved them? Before him, some of the speakers also have used the same words, Sisters and Brothers of America. When I was going through the Parliament of Religions report, I saw some of the speakers before him have also addressed the audience in the same way. But nobody clapped. But when Vivekananda told these 5 words, people started clapping. What is the reason? So Sister Nivedita, an Irish-born woman, disciple of Swami Vivekananda, she says that Vivekananda has been practicing the men as his brothers, women as his sisters. He has been practicing all through his life. From childhood he has been thinking every man is my brother, every woman is my sister. Because he has been practicing a truth, a fact in his life, when he rose there and spoke, that touched everyone's heart. They all felt he is really our brother. And that's why they clapped. So, you find that harmony comes not because of giving speeches. If I come and speak to you about harmony, it doesn't going to give any effect on the people who are listening to it, unless and until I practice myself and say that. So, there in that lecture, Swami Vivekananda gave a small story. The story was very simple. Only 5 minutes lecture he gave. And for that he became an international figure. What was the story? A frog from the sea was jumping inside the shore, and suddenly, by mistake, it fell into a well. When it reached the ground of the well, in that small water was there, and there on a rock, another frog was sitting. That frog is called frog in the well. Is meeting now frog of the ocean. Now the frog in the well met this frog. He said, hey, from where have you come? Then the frog of the ocean said, well, I am coming from the ocean. What? What ocean is? Is it big enough? Like that is showing 2 hands. Then the frog of the ocean said, my brother, no. It is much, much bigger than this. Then the frog in the well jumped from one place to another place and said, is your ocean bigger than this? Then the frog of the ocean said, my brother, you cannot compare your well. After telling this story, Swami Vivekananda says, every Hindu sitting in his own village, sitting in his own world of ideas, is like the frog in the well. Every Christian secluded in his own ideas of religion is a frog in the well. Every Buddhist who considers other than Buddhism nothing is valid is living in a frog in the well. So he says, frog in the well, the characteristic is available to all of us. But when you go to ocean, when you become a frog of the ocean, then you understand how vast the world is. How wonderful the diverse faiths are there. These diverse faiths are extremely important for us. And After this first stage of exclusivism, by seeing the different parts of the world, by coming into contact with the people of professing different faiths, man starts improving upon his mind. Then he comes to the second stage, and that stage I would call, or the philosophers call, inclusivism. From exclusivism, you promote yourself to inclusivism. What is the inclusivism idea? This inclusivism idea is, I belong to a particular faith, that faith alone is true. All other faiths are wrong, that is exclusivism. Inclusivism will say, all other faiths are not true, but I allow them to practice. And I pray to God, oh God, these people, they do not know what is the true path. They are all gone awry. They have lost their path. Oh my Lord, please bring them to the correct path. You don't believe in the fact that other religion is also true. What you believe is, you take compassion over the other people and say to your God, oh God, these people don't know what is the correct path. Mine is alone is correct path, and let them come and embrace my path. This is called inclusivism. This is called tolerance. You tolerate another person. So you tolerate another person's method of living, ways of living. This is called tolerance. So Swami Vivekananda says that in Hinduism, the word tolerance is not there. If you are professing another faith, every Hindu accepts your faith as correct. That is what our founder, Sri Ramakrishna, experienced in his life. When he called God, he could see God is everywhere, in everyone. You know, Sri Ramakrishna was passing through the Calcutta streets. You know, in those days, Calcutta was ruled by Britishers, and it was the capital of India. It's a huge thing. Some of the British types of buildings, when I see here, I remember my Calcutta, because they are all almost equal type of buildings, Britishers' buildings. And there he was traveling by a cart, a horse-driven cart. And he's sitting and looking through the window. And his disciple, young boy, was sitting with him. And he is doing namaste. You know, this is the way that we say namaste. We greet. You also greet like this, putting the two palms together. Why should I greet you like this? Hinduism says, because God is within me, in the same way God is within you. So when I greet you like this, I means the God in me greets God in you. God has recognized its mirror in another person. So it says, welcome, greetings. So he was doing like this to everything. And there was a tavern. Tavern, you know, bad people are gone there. And some girls were standing there, the tavern girls, they don't have good character. And he is doing like this, this is called pranam. You must learn 2-3 words today. One word is pranam. Pranam means namaste. So he was doing like this. And the boy who was sitting with him, he said, oh master, what are you doing? They are not good girls. And you are doing like this? He said, what are you talking? My divine mother, the goddess whom I worship, who is my chosen ideal, has come in this form, and she is showing me her form in this way. She is only there. The goddess is there, not ordinary human being. The goddess is within this. So I bow down to her. That was the highest. See, because he has practiced, he has realized this, he had no qualms in accepting everyone as God, as divine. Swami Vivekananda uses the word divine. He says, each soul is potentially divine. Third day we are going to speak about the souls. I am going to tell you how you choose your parents, how you come into your family, and what is the karmic law by which you are You are goaded, you are compelled to be born into a particular family and either suffer or enjoy. That is a huge law of karma is working. Third day I am going to speak to you. But this fact that if you experience the truth of other religions, you will never quarrel. Why there is no harmony today? Because we are not experiencing the truth of the validity of the other religions. I understand my religion alone is true, that is exclusivism. I accept other religions, I tolerate other religions, but I know that this is not true, that is inclusivism. Now the third stage comes, philosophers have coined another word, and the third stage is called pluralism. This pluralism is a very beautiful concept. I am happy to tell you, I come from Singapore. I am in Singapore now. Singapore country as such, as a government's practice and philosophy, they have adopted this pluralism as a main plank for bringing harmony. Pluralism is a wonderful concept. In multiracial, multi-religious, multi-ethnic groups are staying there, the philosophy of pluralism is coming very handy to preserve the harmony and peace. If you don't follow pluralism in such societies, which societies? The society consisting of multiracial, multi-religious, multilinguist, multi-ethnic, all different groups are together in one place, there the pluralism is going to save you. And the government must give full support to pluralistic ideology. When the government is behind that ideology, then nobody can go against that. If you go against that, I shall simply deport you. Finished. You are not fit to stay in our country where you are bringing disharmony amongst the people. The government decides. It is not the religious leaders. The government will say, in our country I want peace. So if you are disturbing us, our peace, you are not fit to stay here. So we put you in the plane and send it to your original home. And today Singapore is a heaven of peace. When you come there, multi-religious, multi-ethnic, multi-social people are there. Languages plenty. Official languages themselves are 4 in number. Chinese, then Tamil, then Malay and English. Though English is used very prominently everywhere. Even 4 languages have been given the official status, mind you. So peace is compulsory. Then the society flourishes. How in a southeastern region, a small country, it is smaller than the smallest state in India, mind you. It has become first world country. Because all these 50 years, only last year we celebrated Golden Jubilee of Singapore, 50 years. Last 50 years, there was no fight. There was, in the history we find, if anybody brings anything that goes against peace, the government comes down heavily on that person. So the government support is called Raja support. In India we call Rajatva. The Raja must support this philosophy, then that country lives in peace. Pluralism is very good. What is the meaning of pluralism? I want peace at any cost. So you cannot fight. That is one view from the government side. But from the philosophy side, from the followers of faith side, what is that? That means, are they still hating each other? Are they able to live in harmony? Yes, to some extent. Because of the sword dangling on my head, I am very, very peaceful. If the sword is not there, perhaps I may go against it and I may fight with you, with my neighbor. Because the sword is handling, so I am okay. But by practicing this, the harmony, compulsorily a day will come that you also promote yourself to that idea. So in pluralism, you accept other religions, other faiths, other ideas as true and valid. You accept that. As I told you, the first idea was that I am alone true. The rest are not true. Second is, my path is true, but the other path is wrong. That's why we pray to God, not fight with them, we pray to God and bring them to our. Still the difference is there. So there will be no peace. Some people we see come and sit and then we talk to them and suddenly started telling, in houses it happens, Some of the houses, they come and tell us, Swami, they call me Swami, Swamiji they call. They say, Swamiji, is in my house, one preacher came and he said, he gave me a book and he told me, what are these books you have kept here? Then I told, this is the Ramayana. This is the religious books I have kept. Throw them in the dustbin. What books I am giving, keep these books. Exclusivity. So, these type of things are still there. So, what happens in pluralism? In pluralism, you accept the validity. Okay, you are following a particular path of religion. Okay, you be there. Don't fight with me. Don't come and tell me my path is wrong. Don't start any quarrel. But even though you are practicing pluralism, is the peace that you are getting there, is it real? That is what my question. My question is there any real peace? Even beyond pluralism, one has to go. One has to go much, much farther in the path to get the real peace. What is that real peace? In the first consideration, no peace at all. In exclusivism, no peace. In inclusivism, there is partial peace. Though always nagging at you that no, your path is wrong, you come to my path. This nagging is going on. So the peace is only partial. I don't cut your head, that's all. But I allow you to live, but I am telling you that you are wrong in inclusivism. But in pluralism, I accept, okay, you are allowed. You practice your religion, I practice my religion. Let us not come together to find out the similarities of our religions. Don't disturb me. In pluralism, what happens in some of the other societies, I'm not talking about Singapore, but in some of the other countries where pluralism was followed, where the state head declares that we are secular country, we are not religious country, we are secular country. In those places we have seen that the pluralism makes each religion secluded. If you are a Buddhist, you follow your Buddhist religion, but don't come and tell me. So a Buddhist will say, I follow my religion, don't come and talk about your religion. Where are the similarities? Where are those threads of oneness that we can find? That effort is not undertaken. So, pluralism also does not give you a real peace. I am going to give you that. What is real peace? Peace is there, no doubt. But is it real peace? Why I am calling the adjective word real I am using for peace? It is because the peace must be not periodic. It must be constant, forever. If that is periodic, then it is not a real peace solution. You may just silence me by somehow or other and keep me, and then I also harbor those inimical ideas in my mind. But because of the sword hanging on my head, I keep quiet. Will that bring us real peace? No. Real peace can come only when you experience, when you follow in your life and accept the validity of the other path. So long you don't accept the validity of the other path, real peace is elusive, I should put it. You are chasing it, but it is never coming under your grasp. So what is this real peace and what is that stage called? Swami Vivekananda while speaking in America and London and also in India. He has brought out this idea in many of his lectures. He, first time in the philosophy, I should say, that he brought out to be able to understand for those English-speaking people. He put our ancient ideas of India into those English words so that we who do not know the ancient language of Sanskrit, we can understand properly. What did he say? He says, real peace is possible only when you transcend all these three stages and reach a stage of universalism. This is a very big word, a mouthful word, I should say. Universalism, from the word universe. Universalism, what does that mean? How does it different from exclusivism and inclusivism and pluralism? How this has become more important, which will give real peace? So Swami Vivekananda gives this idea that what is the origin of religion? When we were all born, when the humanity was born, I was in South Africa for nearly 8 years. I had gone to the cradle of humanity, a cave where they take you. Now it has become a historic spot. For tourists, it's very important. The first human being came in South Africa. How many years before? Millions of years before. The first Homo sapien appeared in a continent of Africa, not anywhere else in this world, as per the proofs that are available. These are all very scientific proofs available. The first human, with 4 feet we have been walking, animals, as they walk with 4 feet, we have been also walking. And we stood up and we started walking with 2 feet, Homo sapiens. And the first front legs, we started using as hands. The first human being came in South Africa. So I'm proud to say to the people, yes, I was in South Africa where I have seen the cave where the first human rose, not walking by 4 legs, but walking by 2 legs. And that Homo sapiens, that race, started multiplying and were going on, spreading to different parts of the world. Different directions they left for want of food. Search of food and livelihood, they started moving from different places. And a time came, I'm talking about say 10,000, 15,000 or 1 million years ago, where the humanity was there in this world at different places. And they were all growing in their own way. They have their own type of civilization that was growing. Egyptian civilization, Mesopotamian civilization. Coming to the eastern part, you will find Vedic civilization, Hindu civilization. So ancient, Vedic civilization. All these civilizations have been growing, not connected with each other, because the world is vast. And in this vast world, because of no communication facilities, of transport facilities, and knowing each other, you know how long after Vasco da Gama found out America. So these are all historical things, recent only. So the world was actually disjointed. The societies grew up in each place. They grew up in civilization and culture, but disjointed with one another. The religions grew in those societies. A great man comes in a society and his words are so powerful and people listen to him. People become followers. Likewise, in each society of these different places of the world, great men arose and people started following them. And that became different faith. Likewise, you will find in the Middle East, Jesus Christ rose. Likewise, Muhammad Nabi rose. And in India, you will find there are many great men like that they came. And followers started coming to them. So Vivekananda says that these labels of religions were all invented later by us. When the great man was born, he never invented a label for his followers. He only expressed the truth that he has realized in his life. He says, this is what I have understood. Vedahametam, Purusham Mahantam, Adityavarnam. He says, our Vedic sage says, hey people, listen to me. I have known the truth. The truth is as bright as or brighter than the sun. I have known the truth, he says. So the Rishi, the sage declares. So that type of sages, when they come, people are attracted to them and they go behind them and they become their followers. Now, later only the labels are put for each place. Oh, that group that has been professing a particular form of civilization, particular form of methods of livelihood, you call in this label. And you put this label here in the Middle East. You put another label in the Southeast Asia. You put another label in Japan. You put another label in India. So all the countries, when they were disjointed, when they started mingling with each other, we call each other. Do you know, Swami Vivekananda says, this Hinduism word itself is a misnomer. Because we were never called Hindus. It was the Iranian people who came to India, and there was a river called Sindhu, and in Iranian language, Parsi language, Sa is not pronounced. It is pronounced as Ha. So Sindhu people are called Hindu people. So beyond the Sindhu river, whoever stays, they are all Sindhus. In their pronunciation, they are Hindus. So the Hindu name itself has come from outside. Label, mind you. If you use Google Gmail, you know how many labels you can put. For each subject you can put a label and keep all your letters there. So the labels were invented. These religious names, the sects names are all mere labels. So Vivekananda says beautifully, forget about these labels for 2 minutes. Just forget. There are no labels in this entire world. When I sat in the office and the Venerable nun took us to the office and gave us very invigorating tea with the lemon tea, and she gave me. So it was very nice. In that I saw a picture. A picture has been kept of the entire world. You see the world. The humanity is there at different spots of the world. Remove the labels. What remains there? Humanity. Can you have that empathy to the humanity? If a person in far away, far long, say London, a person is suffering. I am sitting in Australia. What a difference of miles of. Can you feel empathy for the suffering of that person who is in far away country? Because he is a human, I am a human. I tell my congregation, when I speak to them on Sundays, I tell them, look, don't you have empathy for the humanity? Leave alone all the labels. You are sitting in your comfortable home in a sofa and taking ice cream in your hand, and you are sipping one by one spoon. At that time in the television news, one tragic accident is being shown. 30 people dead. Train has fallen into the river. They are showing the picture. Still you are continuing with eating your ice cream. Is it proper? Don't you feel sad? For that 1 second, can't you not stop your ice cream eating and be empathetic to the suffering that is being shown in the screen? Where is your humanism gone, I ask? Can you not feel empathy to the sufferings of others? I was in one place called Ranchi in India. It is a tribal majority country, state. There I was working, and one tribal girl, I met her in the village. She said, Swami, will you please come into my house and bless my house? So I entered. She was only 12-year-old. Her father and mother were standing there. They welcomed me. I went and then I talked to her, I blessed them and came away. Next, while coming back from there, I gave from my pocket, I had some rupees. I gave that 100 rupees note and then came away. Because they are poor people, I gave. 1 week after the girl came to my office, I asked her, how is that money? Have you kept it? She put her eyes down. I said, what happened? Is it stolen? She said, no. She's not opening her mouth, only by gesture she's telling no. I said, oh, that means your father has taken it and drunk? He said, no. Then what has happened? Where the money has gone? She's still keeping quiet. I said, then I asked, what has happened? Tell me the truth. Then she slowly, very hesitatingly, she told me, Swami, my neighbor has 2 children and they didn't have sweaters for the cold weather. Now it is 4 degrees temperature. I am having sweater, but those 2 little children did not have. So I took the money and purchased sweater for them and gave them. This is called humanism. Are you able to feel empathy with the suffering person? And are you feeling joyful at another person having a very good life? This is the bane of our life. If our next door neighbor has got a big screen of TV, then I must also have. And you become jealous of the next door neighbor. You don't even like other person to progress in life. If he progresses by dint of his labor and intellect, then you start feeling jealousy. There is no empathy. There is no humanism. In the same way, the suffering time also, you don't have empathy. This empathy is very essential. When you practice this empathy in your life, you have seen that you will never start hating others. Whatever label is put, I have told you, remove the labels and look at humanity as humanity. We may belong to different races, multilingual, multiracial, all those big words we use. Are you able to sit with somebody next to you, another racial person comes and sits? You say, don't touch me. In South Africa, you know the history, the days of apartheid, where the blacks and Indians were never allowed to go with the whites. And all the country in the world, they were opposing that theory. Why? Because human empathy is lost. In India itself, I am sorry to feel sometimes the caste system that brought disempathy. It kept certain people away from you. But all those things have changed. Modern India is entirely different. It is now inclusive. It's putting everyone together. That's why India is progressing very fast. It's a massive country, I tell you. It's like Australia or a little smaller in the area, but in population it is much, much bigger. And that country, with all the discordant notes everywhere, it is progressing very fast in the modern days because people have understood the worth of being united. So the practice in your life that as a humanity, if you are able to feel for the other person, then there is possibility of peace, a real peace. Otherwise, real peace is very, very far away. I do not know at all in this world that real peace will come. But as a man of religious faith, I can never lose hope. I always feel that one day is going to come when there will be real peace, where humanity will treat all the humans as humans and will give us dignity and will give us that prestige, irrespective of the differences. That is why Ramakrishna Mission has taken up extensive service activities in many countries, starting from India. And our policy is we shall serve everyone who comes to us, irrespective of caste, creed, race, religion. No question of difference. In our run hospitals, you will find Christian patients are there, Muslim patients are there, Hindu patients are there, Buddhist patients are there. If you go to Banaras, Varanasi, you will find Buddhist patients, monks are being treated. We have no problem. Because we believe in that. We believe so strongly that humanity is one. Unless you raise your level to the level of universalism, which Swami Vivekananda has coined the word. Of course, it has got different connotations at different contexts. But I am talking about this universalism from the context of different faiths. This universalism, when it comes, there will be real peace. Is it possible to get it quickly? No. Humanity has to learn. The learning in life experience doesn't come immediately. I tell you. One has to learn by very many mishaps, very many troubles. After that only, when the lessons come and shake him, then only he starts learning. How did Buddha learn? You remember the story? When Buddha was a prince, the Siddhartha prince was moving, and his father saw to him that no type of horror things is given to him. He should not be exposed to anything bad, anything sorrowful. That prince was one day, when his king was not there, he told his charioteer, "Hey, I want to see our country. Take me through the country." And the charioteer, what he will do? The prince is telling now, ordering, so he accepted. He took him. While sitting in the chariot, while the chariot was moving, he saw different sceneries. A man, old man, with a staff in his hand, unable to walk properly, slowly he was walking. That Siddhartha prince asked the charioteer, "Hey, what is this? I have never seen in my palace." Then that charioteer said, "Oh sir, oh prince, this is called old age." Old age? Everyone will get old age? Yes. Everyone will become old one day or other. Then he asked, "Will I also become old like this?" "Yes, sir. You also will have a wrinkled face. You also will have a staff in your hand to walk for support." That was a turning point in his life. 3 other instances also he saw. I am not going to the story of Buddha because you all know that. Just for example, I gave you one incident. So 3 other incidents he saw. That was the turning point in Prince Siddhartha's life. No more prince. And he became the king of humanity. Swami Vivekananda calls him king of humanity. He was only a prince. He could have become a king of that area, of the geographical state, if he had remained, if he had not become a monk. But it shook him to his core, and he left his home and he became a monk. And today he is venerated as the king of humanity. Think of it. Likewise, if the experience comes, then you turn. Does the experience come to all of us at the same time? Then this moment itself, world peace has come. It is a tall order. It is not going to come. The real peace is still elusive. You have to try. Even in the small group, here only 60 people are sitting. 60 people are thinking at this moment about this elusive peace. That is enough for the time being. Likewise, group, all over the world, people have to think. And if they think like that, then you will find peace is going to come. Otherwise, by law also you can bring peace, as I told you. That peace is short-lived. Suppose the law changes. Suppose the country's law changes, what will happen? So it depends upon something else. Peace cannot be dependent upon something external factor. If you keep on external factor dependence, the peace cannot be achieved. The eternal peace cannot be achieved. So it is necessary that we must undergo certain experiences. And that is what happening in this world. The law of karma is active. There are several sad experiences that the humanity is undergoing. These experiences will bring the light of the day and let us not repeat in our life. If not in this life, in the next life. Because we believe in reincarnation. We believe we had past births. We are going to have future births. So this birth experience are going to go with me to the next birth. We believe in reincarnation. So our telling is this universalism concept is alone the real peace you can get. Momentary peace, any measure that is required, it is a must. You must take it. I tell you. Anywhere, for keeping peace and harmony, if you have to take even a stronger step, take it. Because that is the first qualification for getting improvement in your life. The life has to progress monetarily or physically and intellectually. The life has to progress. For that, peace is a must. A peaceless land can never progress. So even by law, if it is required, you must have peace. But then a real peace comes when each one of us experiences that empathy and talk to each other in that manner, when the real peace comes. I will never fight with you. I will never talk ill of your path that you are following. Rather, when you are having any celebration in your home, you would come ask me, hey, you are following Christian faith, you are following Indian faith, Hindu faith. Why don't you come to my home and see? That is what happening slowly in Singapore now. Chinese people following that Taoism, they come and invite during the festivals. Hindus during the Diwali festival invite Buddhist and Taoist, and Malay people, Muslims. They are invited to their homes and they come. They have together party. They eat and they make merry. At that time, the labels are taken out. See this. No more labels. Only when you put the label, all the differences come. So Vivekananda says, think for a moment in this vast world. Remove the labels for a moment and see the real peace is already there. So he says you don't need to even search for it. The real peace is existent. We are not discovering it. Discover. There is a cover of ignorance. You remove that discover. And the cover is removed, the real peace is visible. So I believe in this idea that when humanity realizes that empathy for each other, real peace is possible. This real peace is possible, philosophically to put it, that concept of universalism has to be promoted and told to everyone so that we are prepared, we are trained to see each human without the label. Is it possible? A small community has come to hear me today. I am very happy. In Toowoomba, a very beautiful place, I hear this PLLAC is doing a very good job. And I am very thankful to them for inviting me to speak on the 3 topics. So 3 days we will be speaking on the topics, and I would like to come. I would like you to see every day and bring your friends and relatives also, so that we can have certain ideas thrashed out. And I would love if from the audience any questions come on the topic that we discussed. Question answer is allowed? Okay.
I'm just wondering, on a world or global level, we here, in the small flock of sheep, so to speak, we can accept harmony of the faiths, and we see, and you've explained, that there is a real solution. But it's only, I feel, only with a small flock of people that will accept there is a real solution. But on a global scale, man being imperfect as he is, as he's going through the evolutionary process, this can surely never be on a global basis because of a man's ego, because of man's naivety and ignorance, where he can accept that there is a real solution, because surely he is focused only on what he perceives to be the truth, which is contained with his own soul, and outside that tunnel vision that he's got, nothing else, he won't allow himself to grow out of honest, if I could use the word, honest ignorance. So my question really to you is, do you foresee the day in which all religious faiths and spiritual paths can see this real solution and harmony amongst the faiths?
Yeah, thank you for the nice question. Yes, I do believe that stage of development is for humanity. It must come one day. Think of the humanity's past. 15,000 years before, what were we? Were we not hunters? Were we not killing animals and birds and eating? Were we not even not knowing how to cook? Humanity was that stage. That humanity has progressed so much today. As on today in 2016, is that humanity still living? Maybe in some secluded forest it may be there, but no more. The world has become a village, as I said. If the world has become a village, all the village, in village what is the significance? Each one knows each other. In a big town you do not, in Sydney you cannot know another person. But in a village, there are only 200 houses, all the 200 families you know. That is what world is progressing now. You know, from sitting in Australia, you have friendships with Americans. How it is possible? It is because the world is becoming smaller and smaller due to the advancement in communication technology. So the humanity has to progress. The progress cannot be stopped by whatever violent actions you take, whatever backdated ideas you may have. No, it cannot stop. Because even in those communities who harbor the most worst kind of backdated ideas, people have come up, saints have come up, religious leaders have come up, and they said, no, you can't do this. So there are people, a voice is coming up slowly, though I would like it to be loud enough, but presently it is feeble. That feeble voice must rise. We must give all of us to one way we must think. I tell my congregation that close your eyes and think and send the good thoughts from your mind to the entire universe. This is not a new idea in Hinduism. Every Hindu, when he is taught the religious scriptures, first he is asked to do prayers. You know what is the prayer? Give me this, give me that. No, not that prayer. Prayer is universal. Sarvesham swastir bhavatu. Sarvesham shantir bhavatu. Sarvesham mangalam bhavatu. Sarvesham purnam bhavatu. May everyone be happy. May everyone be diseaseless. May everyone, that everyone is what? The entire humanity. That is the universal prayers ought to be taught. I tell other religious factions also, please, along with teaching your own religious sectarian ideas, doesn't matter. You teach about your faith, no problem. Along with that, take out those proper quotations from your saint, the universal quotations, and place it before them. Children, we have children's Hinduism classes. In the whole of South Africa, we have got 400 children come attending our classes. I have seen that. And even in Sydney, as well as in Brisbane, our Swami Atmeshananda is running children's classes. What they are taught, today when I went to their classroom, I saw it is written there, Sarvesham swastir bhavatu. May everyone be happy. This is what we have to teach the children. If I am taught in the childhood, hate another person, kill another person, when I grow old, what I shall do? I will hate, I will kill. In my childhood, if I am taught, love another person, accept another person, then when I grow old, I will do that. You see, the responsibility of future peace is in the hands of the present generation. If present generation is not taught, is not encouraging these peace efforts, then future will not be peace. But one day I think the humanity has to progress. And that progress, height of the progress I am talking, what is the height of the progress of the humanity? In spite of differences, we shall remain united. Thank you.
पूर्णमदः पूर्णमिदं पूर्णात् पूर्णमुदच्यते पूर्णस्य पूर्णमादाय पूर्णमेवावशिष्यते। ॐ शान्ति शान्ति शान्तिः।
हरिः ओम तत्सत्। श्री रामकृष्णार्पणमस्तु।
Peace.